Welcome, Wim.
Thank you.
All right. So, Wim, was there anything you wanted to add to how we connected with Good Nature Agro, how we connect with some of our other investments, and how we go about building our pipeline?
Yes, first of all, I wanted to comment back also on what Carl and Sunday said. Good things always come in threes. And so the introduction to Good Nature Agro came in threes, actually came from three directions at the same time. And that was in itself already sort of a good sign. And it has been sort of going from good to better ever since in terms of visiting them. It was one of our first Agri investments in the region. And therefore, also we decided to come with quite a substantial team in terms of number. At least I wouldn't want to talk about the rest of the substance, but the numbers were quite substantial. It was Els and myself and Mercy and Danielle who came to Zambia, and that was really very insightful for us, and for us also really supported us in our conviction that this is the kind of business we would want to invest in. And interestingly enough, we saw a lot of similarity with the kind of microfinance investment businesses we had invested in a much earlier stage in West Africa and India, where ironically also we also came to the conclusion, or not ironically, but interestingly, that just scaling for sake of scaling, the kind of dumb scaling that you sometimes see in microcredit, that actually had hurt the sector, is also one of the big pitfalls in agriculture. So we're very glad also to see Carl sort of making that point really and driving that point really home very well in his TED talk and in the way he explained it earlier. So for us, those were the kind of points that confirmed us in our conviction. Typically, to your question, Kim, about how we source deals. Typically, we have three ways of sourcing deals. One is spontaneous. Through our website, we actually get a substantial number of applications through our website, on average about 100 a month, and those feed our pipeline. The second way is through referrals through our network, through existing investments, through existing investors. Other sort of connections in our network. Those are the kind of warm introductions that typically help. It enables us to already get a bit of a feel of who the entrepreneurs are that we get those referrals for. And then thirdly, through events, where we also go out ourselves to actually identify, and not just events, but also through connections with organizations that organize events or organize acceleration programs or incubation programs, and we actively scout for deals through those types of sources. In this case, actually, the connection came through an event, through a network, and through an email. So that's why it is a good example for us for an introduction that really worked.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Wim. And Carl, what you said in your chat with Lungelo and Sunday, you mentioned quite briefly is your ecosystem approach, right? You look at the smallholder farmer as a whole, you're looking at the ecosystem as a whole. And I was wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about that and why it's so important.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I would say it comes back to what are the key drivers that you need to have in place in order to enact change, and do you want to do it alone or do you want to do it with others? And 99% of the time you can't do it alone, nor should you. So like I would say the first ecosystem component that we pay attention to is the market. We have no interest in becoming an FMCG oriented company making fast moving goods that are sold in supermarkets. And that means that we need to partner with buyers who care about how their product is sourced, care deeply about the quality of the product, and that to some extent are willing to pay a good price that comes back to the farmers for that product. And then we can play a linking role. And I think that that's the obvious example, but that kind of mentality trickles through in all ways that we engage farmers. You know, do we want to be the ones financing phones for our farmers forever? No, we really don't. But we do want to get enough proof points and have enough phones in the hands of our private extension agents that we can serve our farmers better. And then we'll continue looking for opportunities for someone who really wants to play that role, as well as leveraging the information that is generated from our activities to try and push the telcos to step in and actually get service in some of these underserved rural. More and more, we want to be a catalyst for creating that strong ecosystem, not a do-everything company, but a start-everything company.
Wow, that's such an interesting way to put that, and I'm definitely going to take that out as one of the quotes for today. So thank you, Carl. And Wim, we also talk quite a lot about a sort of ecosystem approach to investing. I was wondering how our sort of ecosystem approach may or may not mirror what Carl has just described.
Yeah, it mirrors it very much, and that's also why I think it's we're finding that the investment in Good Nature Agro really fits our approach, but also the way we work together with Good Nature Agro and the team really sort of gels well with us. So our ecosystem approach is also very much around wanting to add value, not just by offering advice or offering sort of insights or sharing some of the learnings about, you know, the growing pains that a business goes through and how we can help the entrepreneur there and the company. But it's also about sort of understanding what the wider ecosystem of the company that we invest in looks like and how we can contribute to that ecosystem. And that has to do with simple things like, you know, making connections to funders that are able to finance the company post our investment. Typically, need is also there for working capital finance or for figuring out how to deal with currency complications in your balance sheet, or those kind of questions would pop up. And there, it is very useful to be able to bring the advice and the connections and the insights from the entire ecosystem around ourselves, but also the ecosystem around the company that they might not have connections with, and help build that ecosystem around the company. And for us also as investors in emerging markets, this is a really important part of our approach. Contrary to what you see in developed markets, where you can assume that there is an ecosystem around a company and you just need to only analyze the company and to identify whether you think that company will be successful in its own market, but you don't have to consider the further ecosystem implications. In many situations where we invest, the ecosystem around a company simply doesn't exist. And so it's not just evaluating the company itself, but also the ability to grow that ecosystem around the company alongside making the investment. And that's why sort of we like the ecosystem approach of Good Nature Agro. They don't operate in a silo, but they're really sort of you know, very focused on that holistic approach towards their own clients and their the farmers and the clients that they sell to, and so that really gels well with us.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I suspected we obviously had some alignment and overlap, but it's always good to get a little bit more of the details. And I wanted to switch back to you, Carl and Sunday. Wim mentioned in his presentation about the head, hands, and hearts of a team, and a little bit about what we look for in entrepreneurs. I was wondering, you know, what do you look for when you're building a team? What are the types of people that you're looking to hire, and how do you create that successful, ambitious culture that startups often need to get going and to really get some traction?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I was fortunate to sort of be the people person from the beginning of the company, actually heading the talent. But again, that's also derived a lot from the passion that I have for having, I think, not only the ecosystem, but also good people that can work with the farmers in the ecosystem. So I would say some of the interesting attributes that we had from the people that we've hired, I think we learned on quite early that when you are looking for people to build such a model like ours, you really have to dig deep the skill sets. You also have to dig into character. You have to dig into issues of integrity. You also have to dig into passion. So a lot of the people that we had started with actually became almost identical to what we were in terms of characteristics. But we also started to accept that, a dynamic team does not make it challenging, but actually makes it very effective, because you have different opinion sides, and you also have different levels of effort. One thing that's exciting, understand what the goal is. They don't only end at that, they go exceeding. So those are the kind of personalities you want to look for when you're building a team, and that's what we've been looking at. So everybody from just a team and ground, as far as the farmers themselves, those that are turning into the private extension agents, all the way up to the directorial team that we've built and the people in it. So it's made it very easy to sort of pick up what it is that we want, not only by skill set, but what they can offer and what they're willing to put their time into, and also how they can exceed certain goals, just to summarize it.
Yeah, and we hire a lot of entrepreneurial people, and I think that's just credit to the Zambian culture. But one thing that we ask in interviews is, especially at kind of lower to mid-level company, is what's your side hustle? So what's your business on the side? Even if they're fully employed, everyone tends to have a side hustle, and that can give shine a light on people's character and how they think about making money, as well as what they enjoy. So that's something that we've paid a lot of attention to over time.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I'm South African, and it's the same. It's everyone has their side hustle, and you gotta hustle. And so we've spoken a bit about your team and what you feel makes a good fit for Good Nature Agro. And Carl, I was wondering, on the other side, what do you feel makes a good investor, particularly for companies starting out, and particularly in emerging markets?
Yeah, I think it's all about timing and maturity of the company and finding that match. And investors know this as well. And it can be frustrating for an entrepreneur to always feel like the investor you want to meet is just out of reach. But that's part of the journey, and that's really. I'm very glad that we got no's from a handful of groups when we were smaller, because we simply weren't ready for what they expected in terms of reporting and a number of factors. And so when we were first bringing on investment, I think the investors do need to be quite flexible, exceptional listeners, ready to give advice that goes well beyond technical questions. Sayuri Sharper, who's also on this call, is a great example of someone who is an investor, but also just a mentor, and really dug in with Good Nature for years as we were in kind of the leanest, hardest times of our business. And then as the company grows, the needs or the desired investors get a little bit more specific. Like, we were drawn to Goodwell because of their existing portfolio, what we viewed as an ability to, as we wanted to expand out of being perceived as a brick and mortar company. And now, as we're approaching Series B, we're looking at who can really help us set down roots in multiple areas, who can help us reach that next level, who can help us build a strong multi-layered team that can help us scale without losing depth. So each stage has its own priorities, and it's really about defining those before you start meeting people that makes it a little more fun.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was always a lot to learn from the entrepreneurs about becoming a better investor, and I think we can all learn from that. So thank you for sharing that. And then sort of going on from that, so this will be my last question to you, and then I have one last one for Carl and Sunday. But we've spoken a lot about the journey so far for Good Nature Agro, and I'm wondering, Wim, what do you see the future for Good Nature Agro? Where do we see them going?
So if I would say I see them scaling up really rapidly, that would not be the right answer. But but as Carl also said at the interview at the start of this roundtable, it's not an either or. It's not that sort of depth and skill bite each other. It's just that the question is, at which stage in your growth do you prioritize what? And if you prioritize skill over depth at the stage when you're still building out your model, then you risk going the wrong direction, and you reach a lot of people, but you don't really impact their lives. And this is where I see the journey ahead for Good Nature Agro. Is their model that they have been able to apply is I would say sort of about there. I'm not going to stick a number to it, but it's about there. And so in terms of depth that they've been able to reach with the people that they work with, and their ability to actually, think about the daily life of those farmers and the problems that they face and how they can resolve for those problems, they've figured sort of most of that out, and they've also found, not just figured it out, but they've also provided the solutions. And so in that sense, the model is really ready to scale. It's a really interesting challenge now for this model to actually scale without losing the depth in reaching each and every individual farmer. And that's the beauty of the kind of models that Sunday and Carl have built, is that once you get that right and you find a way to actually replicate that without losing the quality. So it's the qualitative and the quantitative that are going to work together in ensuring that impact. That's what Good Nature Agro is ready for to do now. As they said, they're going into Series B. That means that we're going to attract some other investors around the table that definitely will come from that scaling mindset. So we'll need to educate those investors that come on board to make sure that they don't only look at quantity, but also at quality as the company scales. And that's going to be a fantastic journey to go through. We see that with so many of our portfolio companies, that, being a startup is hard. It doesn't mean that being a scale-up is easier. It's some of the constraints that you face when you're really in those early hard days that Carl and Sunday refer to. Those are gone, but there are other constraints that have come into place and other sort of challenges. It's a fantastic journey to be on, so I'm not discouraging them. It's a fantastic few years ahead. The future is bright for Good Nature Agro, and with the team and the new people that have come on board and the spirit in the team, we're very confident that this is the team that can actually pull it off.
Okay. Thanks, Wim. Excuse me, everyone. I'm just recovering from a bit of a cold, so apologies for my coughing. But Carl and Sunday, one last question before we head into the Q&A, where everybody else gets to pick your brains. You've been around for 7 years. So imagine it's now 7 years from today. Good Nature Agro is in the headline. So you're on the cover of Forbes magazine. You're on the cover of Times magazine. What is the headline?
We've moved a significant portion of what was not believed to have to be possible into being possible, and that is being able to move the people that work for or work with, these being the small-scale farmers, into the. These are the people that are running the economy in their small way. These are the people that are providing for each and everybody, and they are having a sustainable future. So doesn't sound very nice, but I think it's very possible.
Let's see, I'll say grade 12 graduation rates among Zambian farmers reaches record high.
Love
it. All right. Well, let's hope that happens, and we'll keep an eye out in 7 years' time. But yeah, thank you guys for that, for joining me for this fireside chat. And like I said, it's not over yet. We still have some time for questions and answers, and I've seen a few already come through. And there's also one or two for you, Vim, as well. So if you could stay for this as well. But just so you know, I am going to prioritize questions to Carl and Sunday, because we have them for a limited time only. And everyone else, we can always put you in contact with Vim, and we can set up a call to discuss any other questions you have. So first question to you, Carl. It says, do you think small-scale farming is the solution for food security at affordable prices, or large-scale corporate farming?
I would say yes, and a bit of both. So one thing that we like to revisit, especially while onboarding people, is that some of the farmers that we engage don't want to be farmers. And we just have to realize that from day one, where their goals are different. Some people want to be shopkeepers, some people want to work for a large company in town, some people want to be in manufacturing. And that's great. So what that means long term is, especially as yields continue to increase and incomes increase, we will start to see aggregation, even with the growing population. That's unavoidable. What we care about is whether that's managed well, and whether it's done in such a way that the economies can get out ahead of this. One thing that concerns me existentially is that we start titling land and using that as collateral before there are other jobs available, and create a crisis that we've seen in other parts of the world before. So I think yes, and just to keep it short and simple, now that I've given a long a long answer, the gains are more immediate within the smallholder farming segment on the continent right now. When we can work with farmers for a couple years and increase yields by 220% and incomes by 500%, you can't do that with commercial farmers anymore. So if we really want to see affordable prices now, the key to doing that is to helping smallholder farmers move from where they are at 20% of yield potential to even 50 or 60. That's the quick win.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you for that answer, and I hope that answers the question well. And maybe just a comment on that while some other people are thinking up some questions. So we had some polls early on, and very interestingly, most people got them both right. And so the answer, well, the question was, one of them was, what percentage of the food supply in Zambia is produced by smallholder farmers? And that is 80%, right? But at the same time, the size of the cultivated land for smallholders farmers is only just over 1 hectare. And so I think that goes quite nicely with, you know, what you're saying about, in response to the question of optimizing smallholder farmers and, you know, getting them to increase their productivity would really have a big, big impact on the food supply, specifically in Zambia. So I have a sneaky question. So you guys are, you know, successful entrepreneurs in Africa, and I'm wondering if you had one piece of advice for an entrepreneur, what would that be? Something short and sweet, maybe a catchphrase you tell your teams.
Sunday, anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that I would say. I'm trying to summarize into something small. Especially I think for entrepreneurs that are in a climate like Zambia, and I use climate there not for weather, but just I think the ecosystem here is that you really have to be tough, but you also have to be very patient. So you have to exercise grit, but you also have to wait in a lot of things. Things don't move as fast as you might think, but they're moving. And that's what matters most. So for everybody that's starting out or in the process and they feel like they're failing, failure is at the point that you say no. and you can always persist and try to get it to the next yes. So that's my bit of advice. So in other words, don't give up. Just keep on going.
Yeah, I'd say as much as we love side hustles on our team, eventually as an entrepreneur, you have to choose just one. So I would, from past experience, that's my most frequent advice to African entrepreneurs is choose your one. You can't do everything. It'll burn you out.
Absolutely. All right. We have a question here that it could be for all three of you. So maybe also something each to contribute, short and sweet. So it says, Vim shared some reasons why to invest in Africa. And one of those trends was the rapid growth of population. And the question is, why is that a positive for Africa?
Tim, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll happily go first. So is it a positive or is it a negative? I think, first of all, it just is. So it's not something that we that we can label either positive or negative. It is something that is, and that actually determines also the investment climate, which just informs us that sort of in economies where the population is growing rapidly, it also means that there's either pressure on the existing economy because there are more mouths to feed, and if the economy itself doesn't use that population growth to its benefit of also growing the opportunities for that growing population, then it's not a positive. But if you manage to turn it around and turn it into an opportunity, and that's what we see happening a lot in Africa, then actually it doesn't have to be a negative. It can be a positive. And there's this thing called the population dividend, which we've also seen happening in China and in India, where actually a rapidly growing population actually produced economic growth in itself. So actually the growing population works as a growth engine for the economy. Now, a growth engine for the economy in itself is also not a positive if it doesn't benefit the population equally. And so, population growth with growing inequality is actually, even if the economy grows, can be a negative again. So that's why I'm saying it's not necessarily in itself a positive or a negative. It matters how it's being dealt with. Fortunately, we do see a growing middle class in Africa as the population grows. And we do see that the population growth is a driver for economic growth that also is reaching the mass markets. But you do need to be sort of very conscious of investing in that in the right way to make sure that it is inclusive growth and not growth that excludes large parts of the population.
Yeah.
Thanks. Any thoughts to add?
I'm very. I'll just share a thought I had when I visited Kenya, and I think this is personal, so don't quote me on it. But I realized that the population was higher in the city, of course, as is like a lot of African capital cities. But one thing that strikes me up to now is that being in a place like Nairobi, for example, is being in a very innovative space, if I would put it that way. And it goes back to, I think, what Carl has been mentioning also on side hustles. But there, it's not a side hustle, it's survival. So in a place that creates so much pressure in terms of population, you can either see it as a problem or you can see innovation. So good startups that are popping out of Nairobi are also telling of the kind of population there is. You think about certain businesses that are, for example, supplying restaurants, that are looking at how people can sort of admit themselves, and it's all riding on the population. You can look at it that way as a positive thing. Yeah, it will encourage people to become. You sort of get your fight or flight kind of emotion and come up with something that helps you and helps the larger population. So I think that's my perception. But I guess I would say maybe the larger population, you get more innovation. I don't know if it's the number of minds or it's the pressure that you get. So that's something I still have also in my mind, and I just want to share the opinion.
Yeah, I just add briefly that the growing youth population is hungry for change and fast. We see this in agriculture, we see this in politics. We just had an election here. It was fascinating to see the conversation on Twitter and elsewhere. You know, if you don't do things in the next 5 years, you're out. And that attitude is new. So I do think that a growing population, increasing number of youth puts the pressure for improvements and for improved quality of life.
Thank you. Very, very interesting discussion. I like that. You know, it's not positive or negative in of itself. It's what we do with the reality that is happening at the moment. And I think that goes for most of our portfolio companies where, you know, there's always challenges, particularly perhaps in Africa, but with that comes opportunity. And so I think we're going to leave that there for today and say thank you to you, Carl and Sunday, for sharing the journey of Good Nature Agro, sharing a bit of your personal stories as well. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Yeah.